My name is Mabel, and I'm 82 years old. I never thought I'd live to hear the words that shattered my heart into a million pieces. But I did, and now I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in this house where I've spent the last 57 years of my life. It was a Tuesday morning in October when everything changed. The autumn leaves were falling outside my kitchen window, the same window where I used to watch my granddaughter Clara play in the yard when she was little. I was making my usual cup of coffee with shaky hands, arthritis, when I heard voices coming from the living room. Clara was visiting with her mother, my daughter-in-law Thelma. I thought it was nice that they came by. Lately, visits had been getting fewer and further between, but I cherished every moment with my family. You see, after my Vernon passed away 3 years ago, these visits were all I had left. I was walking toward the living room to greet them when I heard Clara's voice, crystal clear through the thin walls of this old house. The words hit me like a physical blow. Why is she still alive? We need the house already. She's just wasting away in there, and we could really use the money from selling this place. I stopped dead in my tracks, my coffee cup trembling in my hands. My own granddaughter. The little girl I used to rock to sleep, whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose tears I wiped away countless times. Thelma's voice followed, quieter but no less cutting. I know, honey. But we have to be patient. She's stubborn as a mule, just like your grandfather was. They were talking about me like I was already dead. Like I was some inconvenience standing between them and their inheritance. I backed away slowly, my slippers shuffling against the hardwood floor Vernon and I had installed together in 1987. Each step felt like walking through quicksand. I made it to my bedroom and closed the door as quietly as I could, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out right then and there. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I looked around at the room Vernon and I had shared for so many years. The family photos on my dresser seemed to mock me now. There was Clara at age 5, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on my lap at Christmas. Another photo showed her at 10, helping me plant tomatoes in the garden. Her sweet voice echoed in my memory. Grandma, when I grow up, I want to live with you forever. What happened to that little girl? I picked up the framed photo of Vernon from my nightstand. His kind eyes looked back at me, and I could almost hear his gravelly voice. Mabel, darling, don't you let anyone push you around. But Vernon wasn't here anymore, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my entire life. The house we built together started as nothing more than a dream and a patch of land on the outskirts of town. Vernon worked double shifts at the lumber mill while I took in sewing to save every penny. We mixed concrete, hammered nails, and painted walls together. Every board, every nail, every coat of paint represented our love and our future. I remember the day we moved in. Vernon carried me over the threshold, both of us laughing like teenagers even though we were already in our 20s. This is our castle, Mabel, he had said. No one can ever take this away from us. But he was wrong. I heard Clara and Thelma talking and laughing in my living room, probably planning what they'd do with my home once I was gone. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. They were sitting on the furniture Vernon and I had saved up for, drinking from cups we'd received as wedding gifts, surrounded by the life we'd built together. As I sat there clutching Vernon's photo, tears streaming down my weathered cheeks, I whispered the words that would haunt me for weeks to come. Even my own blood wants me gone. The worst part wasn't just what Clara had said. It was the casual way she'd said it, like my life had no value, like I was already a ghost haunting my own home. This was the child I had helped raise when Thelma struggled with postpartum depression. I was the one who taught Clara to ride a bike, to bake cookies, to be kind to others. Where had I gone wrong? How had I raised a family that saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial gain? I stayed in my room until I heard them leave, listening to their footsteps and muffled conversations as they walked through my house, already claiming it in their minds. When the front door finally closed, the silence was deafening. That night, I barely touched my dinner. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Clara's voice. Why is she still alive? I had survived the Great Depression, raised a son, buried a husband, and weathered countless storms. But nothing had prepared me for the betrayal of my own family. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The days following that terrible Tuesday blended together like watercolors in the rain. I found myself moving through my daily routines like a ghost, each room of my house echoing with memories that now felt more like torment than comfort. Let me tell you about the life Vernon and I built here, because someone should remember it before they tear it all down. We weren't rich folks, never had been, never pretended to be. Vernon worked at the lumber mill for 38 years, coming home each night with sawdust in his hair and calloused hands that were always gentle when they touched my face. I worked at the local elementary school as a teacher's aide for 22 years, helping children learn to read and write. Our only child, Silas, was born in 1965 after 3 miscarriages that nearly broke us both. When the doctor finally placed that healthy, squalling baby in my arms, Vernon cried harder than I did. "He's perfect, Mabel," he kept saying. "Our boy is perfect." We poured everything we had into raising Silas, right? Vernon taught him to fish in the creek behind our property, showed him how to change a tire, how to treat people with respect. I made sure he did his homework, said his prayers, and understood the value of hard work. He was a good boy, really he was. It wasn't his fault that life took him from us too soon. Silas was only 32 when the cancer got him. Lung cancer, even though he never smoked a day in his life. Sometimes life just isn't fair, and there's nothing you can do about it but hold each other up and keep going. That's when Clara came to live with us. She was only 8 years old, and Thelma was falling apart. The woman could barely get out of bed, let alone care for a grieving little girl. So Vernon and I stepped in, like grandparents do. For 6 months, Clara was the light of our lives again. She had Silas's eyes and his stubborn streak, but she had something extra, a sweetness that could melt your heart faster than butter on warm toast. Every morning, she'd crawl into bed between Vernon and me, her little feet cold as ice, chattering about her dreams or asking questions about everything under the sun. "Grandma Mabel," she said one morning, "why do flowers die?" I was brushing her long brown hair, getting her ready for school. "Well, sweetheart, everything has its time. Flowers bloom. They're beautiful for a while, then they make room for new flowers to grow." She turned around, her serious 8-year-old face looking up at me. "But I don't want you and Grandpa Vernon to be like the flowers. I want you to stay forever." My heart swelled so big I thought it might burst. "We'll be here as long as we can, honey. And even when we're gone, we'll still be with you in here." I tapped her little chest right over her heart. She threw her arms around me then. "Grandma, when I grow up, I want to live with you forever and ever. We can take care of each other." Those words sustained me through some of the darkest moments after Silas passed. Even when Thelma eventually got back on her feet and took Clara back to live in the city, I held on to that promise like a lifeline. Clara visited regularly for years. Summer vacations, holidays, random weekends, when she just wanted to get away from her mother's new boyfriend or some teenage drama. This house was her sanctuary, and Vernon and I were her safe harbor. But somewhere along the way, things changed. The visits became shorter, less frequent. Clara started looking at her phone more than she looked at us. She'd roll her eyes when Vernon told his old war stories, or when I tried to teach her family recipes. "Grandma, nobody makes pie crust from scratch anymore," she said during her last Christmas visit before Vernon died. "You can just buy them frozen." Vernon looked hurt, but he just squeezed my hand under the table. Later that night, as we cleaned up the kitchen, he said, "Kids these days don't understand that the love goes into the making, not just the eating." After Vernon passed, Clara's visits became even rarer. When she did come, she seemed impatient, always checking her phone, always ready to leave. She'd hug me goodbye, but it felt obligatory, like she was checking off a box on her to-do list. The woman I'd raised, the child who once promised to take care of me forever, had become a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. Now, sitting alone in my empty house, I realized that the Clara who wanted to live with me forever had died somewhere along the way. In her place was someone who counted the days until I'd be gone. My pension check arrived every month like clockwork, $1, $2.47 after taxes. It wasn't much, but it covered my groceries, utilities, and medications. I knew Thelma struggled financially, especially after her divorce. I'd helped them out before, buying school clothes for Clara, paying for her senior trip, even helping with Thelma's car repairs. But now I understood the truth. They didn't see my generosity as love, they saw it as a preview of what would be theirs someday. They weren't visiting an elderly relative, they were checking on an investment. The house felt so quiet without Vernon. Every creak of the floorboards, every tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway reminded me how alone I was. I started talking to his photograph just to hear a human voice, even if it was my own. "Vernon, I don't know what to do," I whispered to his picture that night. "Our granddaughter wants me dead. How did we get here?" Of course, he couldn't answer. But I could imagine what he'd say. "Mabel, honey, family is supposed to take care of family. If they can't see your worth, that's their loss, not yours." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one lying awake at night wondering if anyone in the world would miss him if he just didn't wake up tomorrow. Little did I know, things were about to get much worse. 2 weeks after I overheard Clara's cruel words, Thelma showed up at my door with what she called a solution. She had that fake sweet smile she always wore when she wanted something, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Mama Mabel," she said, settling into Vernon's old recliner without invitation. "We need to have a serious talk about your future." I poured her a cup of coffee, my hands steadier now than they'd been in days. Funny how anger can give you strength when grief makes you weak. "What about my future, Thelma?" I asked, sitting across from her on the couch Vernon and I had bought for our 25th anniversary. She leaned forward, clasping her hands together like she was about to deliver a prayer instead of a blow. "This house is too big for you now. You're getting older, and what if something happens? What if you fall and can't get to the phone? What if you forget to turn off the stove?" "I'm 82, not incompetent," I said firmly. "I've been taking care of myself just fine. But for how long?" Her voice took on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Wouldn't it be better to make arrangements now, while you can still make decisions for yourself?" There it was. The trap, laid out so sweetly I might have fallen into it if I hadn't overheard Clara's true feelings. "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. "Well, Clara and I have been talking." "I'll bet you have." She blinked, probably not expecting the steel in my voice. "We think it would be best if you sign the house deed over to Clara. That way, when the time comes, there won't be any legal complications. You could keep living here, of course, but Clara would handle all the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance. Wouldn't that be a relief?" I stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, where Vernon's ashes sat in a simple wooden urn. Right next to it was our wedding photo from 1963. I was 19, he was 21, and we both looked like we could conquer the world together. "This house," I said, my back still to Thelma, "isn't just property. It's where Vernon and I built our life together. It's where we brought Silas home from the hospital. It's where Clara took her first steps. Every nail, every board, every coat of paint represents our love and our memories. Mama, I understand the sentimental value, but..." I turned around, clutching Vernon's photograph to my chest. Do you? Do you really understand? Because your daughter thinks I should already be dead, so you can sell it and split the money." Thelma's face went pale. She didn't mean. "I heard her, Thelma. I heard every word." My voice was shaking now, but not from weakness. From fury. "I raised that girl when you couldn't. I loved her like she was my own daughter. And now she's counting down the days until I die. That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair would be having a family that cares about me as a person, not just as an obstacle to their inheritance. Fair would be my granddaughter visiting because she loves me, not because she's checking to see if I'm still breathing. Thelma sat back in the recliner, looking genuinely shocked. Maybe she'd convinced herself that their plan was for my own good. Maybe she'd forgotten that I still had ears and feelings. "I won't sign anything," I said firmly. "This house stays in my name until the day I die, and not a moment before." Her expression hardened. "You're being stubborn, Mama. We're trying to help you." "Help me?" Or help yourselves. She stood up, grabbing her purse.
Fine.
But don't come crying to us when you're lying on this floor for 3 days with a broken hip and nobody finds you. At least I'll die in my own home, surrounded by love instead of greed. After she left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I collapsed onto the couch and sobbed. Not the quiet tears I'd been shedding since Vernon died, but big, ugly, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. I felt like I was fighting a war on all fronts. My own family had declared me the enemy, and I was running out of allies. Over the next few days, the Cold War began. Clara stopped calling altogether. Thelma's daily check-in calls became brief, chilly conversations about the weather. When she did visit, she'd leave my groceries on the kitchen counter and barely speak to me. The silence in the house became oppressive. I started leaving the television on just for background noise, but even the cheerful voices of game show hosts couldn't fill the void left by my family's abandonment. That's when I started talking to Vernon's photograph more seriously. "I won't let them erase you from this world," I whispered one night, holding his picture against my heart. "They can ignore me. They can treat me like I'm already dead, but I won't give up the home we built together. I won't let them turn our love into a real estate transaction." I could almost hear his voice responding. "That's my girl. Don't you let them push you around, Mabel. You're stronger than all of them put together." But strength can only carry you so far when you're fighting alone. 3 days later, everything changed. I was sitting on my front porch, watching the neighbors' kids play in their yard, when a sleek black car pulled into my driveway. A tall man in an expensive suit got out, carrying a briefcase and wearing the kind of smile that reminded me of a shark. He walked up to my porch with confident steps, extending a manicured hand. "Mrs. Patterson? I'm David Randall from Premier Properties. I heard you might be interested in discussing your beautiful home." I hadn't told anyone I was interested in selling, which meant someone else had. "I'm sorry, Mr. Randall, but there's been a mistake. My house isn't for sale." His smile never wavered. "Of course not, ma'am. I just thought you might like to know what it's worth in today's market. No obligations, just information. Mind if I sit down? It's such a lovely afternoon." Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. There was something about his manner that seemed genuinely caring, so different from the cold treatment I'd been getting from my own family. And that, as I would soon discover, was exactly what he was counting on. David Randall had what I can only describe as a gift for making you feel like the most important person in the world. As he settled into the wicker chair next to mine on the porch, he looked around with genuine appreciation. "This is absolutely beautiful," he said, gesturing toward the garden where Vernon and I had planted roses over 30 years ago. "You can tell this home has been loved. You don't see craftsmanship like this anymore." Despite myself, I felt a flutter of pride. It had been so long since anyone had appreciated the work Vernon and I had put into this place. "My husband and I built most of this ourselves," I found myself saying. "The flower beds, the wraparound porch, even some of the interior work." "Your husband was a talented man." "Is he?" "He passed away 3 years ago." The words still caught in my throat. Mr. Randall's expression softened with what looked like genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Patterson. It must be difficult maintaining such a large property on your own." There it was, the same line Thelma had used. But somehow, when Mr. Randall said it, it didn't feel like an attack. It felt like concern. "I managed just fine," I said, though we both knew the garden wasn't as pristine as it used to be, and the porch could use a fresh coat of paint. "I'm sure you do. You strike me as a very capable woman." He paused, studying my face. "But I imagine it gets lonely sometimes." That simple observation nearly broke me. When was the last time someone had acknowledged that I might be lonely? When was the last time anyone had really looked at me and seen a person instead of an inconvenience? "Sometimes," I admitted quietly. "My own grandmother lived alone for 15 years after my grandfather died," he said, leaning forward slightly. "Proudest woman you ever met. Refused to admit she needed help with anything. But I could see it in her eyes, that loneliness that comes from being surrounded by memories but not having anyone to share them with." Tears pricked at my eyes. He understood. This stranger understood something my own family couldn't or wouldn't see. What happened to her? I asked. She eventually realized that asking for help isn't the same as giving up. She found a way to keep her independence while also making sure she was safe and cared for. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. That's actually why I specialize in helping seniors with their housing transitions. I've seen too many families torn apart by financial stress and property disputes. My family thinks I should sell, I said before I could stop myself. And what do you think? The question caught me off guard. No one had asked what I thought in months. I think this house is all I have left of my husband. Selling it would be like selling my memories. Mr. Randall nodded thoughtfully. But what if there was a way to ensure your financial security without losing your emotional connection to this place? What if you could have the best of both worlds? I looked at him skeptically. I'm not sure I understand. Well, there are several creative arrangements we could explore. For instance, you could temporarily transfer ownership to a trust, maintain full living rights while protecting your family from inheritance taxes and legal complications. Or you could do a sale-leaseback arrangement where you sell the property, but remain as a tenant for life. It sounded complicated, but also intriguing. Would I still live here? Absolutely. You'd have guaranteed housing for as long as you want it, plus you'd have immediate access to the equity you've built up over the years. Think about it. You could travel, help your granddaughter with college expenses, maybe even treat yourself to some of the luxuries you've been putting off. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a solution that could satisfy everyone. But wouldn't my family still be upset? I asked. Mr. Randall's expression became serious. Mrs. Patterson, I've worked with hundreds of families in situations like yours. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your loved ones is to take control of the situation before it becomes a crisis. Your granddaughter and daughter-in-law are probably worried about your future, just like you are. This would give everyone peace of mind. He spent the next hour telling me stories about other elderly clients he'd helped. Mrs. Chen, who was able to pay for her grandson's medical school. Mr. Thompson, who used his home equity to travel to Ireland and visit the village where his ancestors lived. Mrs. Rodriguez, who set up trust funds for all her grandchildren while still maintaining her independence. Each story painted a picture of seniors who had found ways to be generous with their families while still protecting their own interests. It sounded almost too good to be true. I need to think about this, I said as the sun began to set. Of course. This is a big decision. He handed me his business card and a folder filled with testimonials and documentation. Why don't you take some time to review these materials? I'll check back with you in a few days, and if you have any questions, you can call me anytime. As he walked back to his car, he turned and smiled. Mrs. Patterson? For what it's worth, I think your husband would be proud of how you've maintained this place. It takes a strong woman to keep a home and a heart running on her own. After he drove away, I sat on the porch until the stars came out, reading through the folder he'd left. The testimonials were glowing, families grateful for Mr. Randall's help, seniors who felt empowered by their decisions to work with Premier Properties. That night, I called Clara for the first time since overhearing her cruel words. Grandma? She sounded surprised. Is everything okay? I've been thinking about what you and your mother said about the house, I said carefully. Her tone immediately became more interested. Oh, and I met with a real estate professional today. Someone who specializes in helping seniors with property transitions. That's great, Grandma. Did you decide anything? I could hear the eagerness in her voice, and it stung. But Mr. Randall's words echoed in my mind. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is take control before it becomes a crisis. I'm still thinking about it. But Clara? This man, Mr. Randall, he made me feel like my feelings about the house actually mattered. He understood why it's hard for me to think about giving it up. There was a pause. Of course your feelings matter, Grandma. We just want what's best for you. Do you, Clara? Do you really? What do you mean? I took a deep breath. I mean, when was the last time you visited just to spend time with me? When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling about anything? Another pause, longer this time. I've been busy with work, Grandma. And Mom said you wanted space to grieve Grandpa Vernon. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe the words I'd overheard were taken out of context. Maybe Mr. Randall was right. Maybe everyone was just worried about my future and didn't know how to express it properly. Could you come visit this weekend? I asked. I'd like to talk to you about the house situation. And I miss you, sweetheart. Of course, Grandma. I'll be there Saturday. After I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Mr. Randall had given me hope that there might be a solution that could work for everyone. And Clara had sounded genuinely concerned about my feelings. Maybe, just maybe, we could get through this as a family after all. I clutched Vernon's photo that night and whispered, "At least someone cares about me, Vernon. At least someone understands." I had no idea how wrong I was. Saturday came with a crisp October breeze that rattled the windows and sent the last of the autumn leaves dancing across my yard. I spent the morning baking Clara's favorite oatmeal cookies, the same recipe I'd used when she was little, and would stand on a step stool beside me, eager to help measure ingredients. She arrived around noon, but she wasn't alone. Thelma was with her, and they both had that same determined look on their faces, the look people wear when they've already made up their minds about something. "Grandma." Clara hugged me, and for a moment, I let myself believe everything might be okay. She even complimented the cookies, though I noticed she only ate half of one. We sat in the living room, Clara and Thelma on the couch, me in Vernon's old chair. The folder from Mr. Randall sat on the coffee table between us like a bridge we all needed to cross. "So tell us about this real estate man," Thelma said, cutting straight to the point. I told them about Mr. Randall, about how he'd listened to my concerns and understood my attachment to the house. I explained the various options he'd mentioned, the trusts, the sale-leaseback arrangements, the ways I could access my home's equity while still living here. "That sounds complicated," Clara said, but her eyes were bright with interest. "What did he recommend?" "He said I should consider a temporary transfer of ownership. I'd sign the deed over to a trust or to someone I trust, but I'd maintain living rights. That way, the property would be protected from taxes and legal complications." Thelma leaned forward. "And who would you transfer it to?" I looked at Clara, my heart full of hope. "Well, I thought maybe Clara. You're my granddaughter, and someday this will all be yours anyway." The look that passed between Clara and Thelma should have warned me. It was quick, but I caught it, a flash of triumph, of plans falling into place. "That makes sense," Clara said carefully. "And Mr. Randall would handle all the paperwork?" "He said he'd make it as simple as possible. One signature, and everything would be taken care of." Over the next hour, they asked detailed questions about the arrangement. How quickly could it be done? What exactly would I be signing? Would there be any way to reverse it if I changed my mind? That last question seemed particularly important to them, though they framed it as concern for my peace of mind. "What if you decide you don't like the arrangement?" Thelma asked. "You'd want to be able to change it back, right?" "Mr. Randall said the paperwork would be designed to protect everyone involved," I said. "I'd have guaranteed living rights, and Clara would have clear ownership." Clara squeezed my hand. "Grandma, I promise I'd never make you leave this house. This is your home. I just want to make sure you're taken care of." Looking into her eyes, I saw the little girl who used to promise to live with me forever. Maybe that girl was still there, buried under adult worries and financial pressures. Maybe Mr. Randall was right. Maybe taking control of the situation was the kindest thing I could do for all of us. "When could we meet with him?" I asked. "How about Monday?" Clara said quickly. I could take the day off work. That Monday morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my nervous mood. Mr. Randall arrived precisely at 10 o'clock, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the same reassuring smile I remembered. Clara and Thelma flanked me at the kitchen table as Mr. Randall spread out the documents. The legal language was dense and confusing, full of words like grantor and beneficiary and irrevocable transfer. "It's just standard legal terminology," Mr. Randall assured me when I hesitated over a particular clause. "The important thing is that you're protecting your family's future while ensuring your own security." Clara put her arm around my shoulders. "Grandma, we don't have to do this if you're not comfortable." But I could hear the disappointment in her voice, see the worry in Thelma's eyes. They needed this security. They needed to know their future was protected. "Where do I sign?" I asked. Mr. Randall pointed to a line at the bottom of the final page. "Right here, Mrs. Patterson. And Mrs. Clara Patterson will sign here as the beneficiary." My hands shook as I picked up the pen. For a moment, I hesitated, Vernon's voice echoing in my memory. "Mabel, don't you let anyone push you around." But I wasn't being pushed around. I was making a decision, a loving decision to protect my family's future. I signed my name in the careful cursive Vernon had always admired, Mabel Rose Patterson. Clara signed next, her signature bold and confident. Mr. Randall witnessed both signatures and gathered up the papers with efficient satisfaction. "Congratulations," he said, shaking Clara's hand. "You're now the official owner of this beautiful property. Mrs. Patterson, you have lifetime living rights, and all the tax benefits will now accrue to your granddaughter." After he left, Clara and Thelma stayed for another hour, both of them seeming relieved and happy. Clara even helped me wash the coffee cups, chatting about her job and her boyfriend like we were just having a normal family visit. "I'm proud of you, Grandma," she said as they prepared to leave. This was the right thing to do. For a week, I felt good about the decision. I'd protected my family's future, ensured that my home would stay in the family, and taken control of a situation that had been causing everyone stress. Then the letter arrived. It was addressed to current resident at my address, from the county tax assessor's office. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made me open it. "Notice of ownership transfer," the header read. "This is to inform you that the property at 1247 Maple Street has been transferred to David Randall, Premier Properties, LLC." I read the letter 3 times before the words sank in. David Randall, not Clara. David Randall owned my house. With trembling fingers, I called the number Mr. Randall had given me. It went straight to voicemail. "You have reached Premier Properties. We are currently assisting other clients, but your call is important to us." I tried Clara's number. It went to voicemail too. I tried Thelma. Straight to voicemail. Panic rising in my chest, I called the county tax assessor's office. After 20 minutes on hold, a tired-sounding clerk confirmed what the letter had told me. My home had been legally transferred to David Randall 5 days ago. "But I signed it over to my granddaughter," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Ma'am, according to our records, you signed a quitclaim deed transferring full ownership to David Randall and Premier Properties. There's no mention of any family member." The room spun around me. I hung up the phone and staggered to the kitchen table, where I'd signed the papers just 1 week ago. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have trusted a stranger over my own instincts? But the worst part was yet to come. That evening, Clara finally returned my calls. "Grandma? Sorry I missed your calls earlier. I was in meetings all day." "Clara," I said, my voice hollow with shock. "The house. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Mr. Randall." There was a pause. Then, to my complete horror, Clara laughed. "Oh, Grandma. Did you really think we'd let you complicate things with some fancy trust arrangement? This was so much simpler." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Randall is Thelma's boyfriend, Grandma. They've been together for 8 months. The whole thing was his idea." My legs gave out. I sank into Vernon's chair, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. "You tricked me," I whispered when I managed to pick up the phone again. "We helped you make the right decision." Clara's voice was cold now, all pretense of affection gone. "You were never going to sell on your own, and we couldn't wait around forever for you to die." There it was, the truth. My chest tightened, as if the very air in the house had turned against me. Clara's voice, the same voice that once called me Nana with the sweetness of innocence, sounded like a stranger's now, sharp and filled with triumph. You planned this?" I asked, my words broken and faint. Clara sighed, as though my disbelief was an inconvenience. "Grandma, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've had your time in that house. You've lived your life. Now it's time to think about the future. Our future." Tears burned my eyes. I baked cookies for you this morning. I thought. My voice cracked. I thought you still loved me. Thelma's voice broke into the call then, firm and unfeeling. Mabel, enough of this guilt game. You should be grateful. David is a professional. He'll get the best value for that house, and Clara will finally have stability. This was never about you losing, it was about us all winning. Winning. The word stabbed me like a knife. My life, my memories, Vernon's laughter in the hallways, the marks Clara herself had made on the doorframe as a little girl, measured not in inches, but in stolen greed. All of it was being cashed in. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. Do you realize what you've done? That home was all I had left of him, of your grandfather, and you handed it over to a stranger. Clara's reply was a whisper, but it chilled me more than any scream could. He's not a stranger to us. Then the line went dead. I sat in the silence of the living room, my hand still clutching the phone, Vernon's chair creaking beneath me. The storm outside had picked up, rain slamming against the window, as though the heavens themselves grieved with me. My hands trembled uncontrollably. For a long time I couldn't move, couldn't think. All I could hear was Clara's voice replaying in my head, "We couldn't wait forever for you to die." Those words turned my heart to stone. My granddaughter, the little girl I had rocked to sleep, had wished me gone. Not only wished it, but acted on it. I thought of calling the police, but what would I say? I had signed the papers. I had written my own betrayal with my own pen. Who would believe me over legal documents? Who would see the trembling hand of an old woman as evidence, instead of a mistake? That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the old house reminded me that it was no longer mine. I was only a tenant now, an uninvited guest in the place I had called home for 60 years. When morning came, I found myself staring at the photographs on the mantel. Vernon in his uniform, young and strong. Clara as a child, frosting on her cheeks from helping me bake her favorite cake. My own smile in those pictures looked so certain, so trusting. But trust had betrayed me. By mid-afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I shuffled to answer it, hoping against hope that maybe Clara had come to her senses, maybe she would apologize, maybe. It wasn't Clara. It was a man in a suit I didn't recognize. His smile was polite but empty, his voice all business. "Mrs. Patterson? I'm here on behalf of Premier Properties. Mr. Randall asked me to deliver some documents. We'll be sending contractors over next week to evaluate the property for renovations." Renovations? My voice shook. What renovations? He tapped the folder in his hand. "This house is scheduled for appraisal. Depending on the findings, it may either be refurbished for resale or demolished for redevelopment. Standard procedure." Demolished. The word rang in my ears like a funeral bell. He handed me the folder, tipped his hat, and walked away before I could form another question. I stood frozen at the doorway, folder clutched to my chest, the October wind whipping against my nightgown. My home wasn't just stolen. It was marked for destruction. For a moment, I thought my knees would buckle beneath me. But somewhere deep inside, under the grief and the betrayal, something else stirred. A flicker of the woman Vernon had loved. The woman who had raised a family, survived hardship, and built a life brick by brick inside these walls. Maybe Clara thought I was too old. Maybe Thelma thought I was too weak. Maybe Randall thought I was too naive. But they had all forgotten one thing. I was still alive. And as long as I was alive, I would fight. I closed the door, locked it, and set the folder down on the kitchen table. My hands still trembled, but not with fear this time. With resolve. They wanted me gone. But I wasn't going anywhere. The next morning, the smell of stale coffee lingered in the kitchen as I sat staring at the folder that stranger had delivered. My hands traced the edges of the crisp papers, but my mind was a storm. They thought I was beaten, an old woman too tired to fight back. They were wrong. I pulled my worn address book from the drawer, flipping past yellowed pages filled with names of neighbors long gone, friends who had passed on, and phone numbers that no longer worked. Finally, I landed on one that made my heart pound. Martha Jennings, attorney at law. Martha had been one of my dearest friends before life pulled us apart. She was Vernon's cousin, sharp as a tack, and the first woman in our family to graduate law school. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but desperation makes you bold. With trembling fingers, I dialed. Martha Jennings' legal office. A brisk voice answered. It's Mabel, I said, my voice cracking. Mabel Patterson. There was silence. Then a warm gasp. Mabel? Oh my lord, I thought you'd forgotten all about me. Her voice alone gave me strength. Through my tears, I poured out everything. Randall, Clara, the papers, the betrayal. When I finished, there was a long pause. Mabel, she said slowly, what you're describing sounds like fraud. If that deed was transferred under false pretenses, there may be a way to challenge it. But I need to see the documents. My heart skipped. You'll help me? Your family, she said firmly. And I won't let anyone rob you of your home. For the first time in days, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope. By the time Martha arrived 2 days later, the October sky had grown heavy with rain. She stepped into my living room like a force of nature herself, gray hair pinned tight, glasses perched on her nose, her briefcase clutched like a weapon. She spread the papers across my table, scanning each page with a practiced eye. Classic predatory scheme, she muttered. He tucked the quitclaim deed in between a stack of trust documents. You thought you were signing over to Clara, but the beneficiary line had already been filled with his company's name. Tears welled in my eyes. So, I was tricked? Yes. And it looks like Clara and Thelma were complicit. Their signatures are here as witnesses. The betrayal cut deeper seeing it in ink. Clara's bold scrawl next to Thelma's loopy letters, proof they had stood by while my life was stolen. Martha adjusted her glasses. The good news is fraud can be challenged. The bad news is it won't be easy. Randall is clever, and from what you've told me, he has Clara and Thelma wrapped around his finger. They'll claim you knew what you were signing. My stomach sank. And the house. She hesitated. Right now, legally, it's his. But if we can prove coercion or deceit, a judge could reverse the transfer. We have to move fast before he flips the property or demolishes it. The word demolish sent a shiver through me. For the next week, Martha and I worked like soldiers preparing for battle. She gathered every photo, every letter, every scrap of evidence I had that tied me to this home. Old utility bills in my name, Vernon's will, even the faded photographs of Clara's childhood birthday parties in this very living room. But with each day that passed, Randall's shadow loomed larger. A notice appeared on my front door. Property evaluation scheduled, Premier Properties. Contractors in hard hats began circling the house, measuring walls, tapping bricks, and scribbling notes. One even dared to mutter, "This old thing won't last another winter." I shouted at them from the porch, fury boiling in my veins. "This is my home. You've got no right." The man just smirked. "Not according to county records, ma'am." That night, I cried into Vernon's old pillow, clutching it as though he might rise up and defend me. But instead of giving up, the tears hardened into something stronger. Resolve. The real blow came when Clara returned. She showed up on a Sunday afternoon, dressed in a sleek black coat, her hair styled like she was going to church. For a moment, my heart betrayed me. I wanted to believe she had come to apologize, to make things right. But her smile was thin and cruel. "Grandma, I came to check in on you," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Check in? Or check if I'm still breathing?" I snapped. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic. You'll be fine. David said you can stay here until construction begins. Then, of course, you'll need to move. But we'll make sure you're comfortable." "Construction?" My voice rose. "You mean demolition?" She didn't even flinch. "Grandma, the property is worth more as a redevelopment site. A row of townhomes will bring in 10 times what this old house is worth. Think of it as progress." Progress. My hands shook. "This is my life, Clara. Your grandfather's sweat is in these walls. My whole heart is here. And you're selling it for townhomes." Her expression hardened. "I'm securing my future. You had yours, Grandma. Don't make me the villain because I refuse to live small. Tears spilled down my cheeks. You already are the villain. For the first time, I saw her mask slip. Her face twisted with anger. Maybe it's time you stopped clinging to the past. You're lucky we even let you stay this long. And with that, she slammed the door behind her, leaving the house shaking as though the walls themselves wept. I sat in silence long after she left, staring at the crack forming along the living room ceiling. Maybe it had been there for years, but I had never noticed it until now. It felt like a warning, the house breaking apart, just as my family had. But then I remembered Martha's words. Fraud can be challenged. That night, I picked up the phone and called her again. Martha, they've scheduled demolition. I can't let them destroy this place. Her voice was calm but firm. Then we won't. We're filing an injunction tomorrow morning. If a judge grants it, they won't be able to touch that house until the case is heard. It's our first line of defense. Hope flickered again. For the first time in weeks, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, I put on my best dress, blue with tiny white flowers, and met Martha at the courthouse. My knees ached climbing the marble steps, but I forced myself onward. I wasn't just walking for me. I was walking for Vernon, for the life we had built, for the dignity Clara and Thelma had tried to steal. Martha filed the paperwork with steady hands, her voice carrying authority as she spoke to the clerk. Within hours, a temporary injunction was granted. They can't touch your house now, she told me with a reassuring smile. At least, not until the hearing. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. Because when we stepped back outside, Randall himself was waiting at the bottom of the courthouse steps. His smile was cold, his eyes sharp as a knife. Mrs. Patterson, he said smoothly, I was hoping we could avoid this ugliness. Martha stepped in front of me like a shield. You conned her, Randall. You preyed on her trust. We're taking this to court. Randall's smile widened. Courts are slow, expensive, and unpredictable. Are you sure you want to put this poor woman through all that stress? She doesn't look strong enough for a long battle. His words sliced me to the bone, but I straightened my back. I may be old, I said, my voice trembling but strong. But I'm not dead, and I'm not giving you my home without a fight. For the first time, his smile faltered. Just slightly, but it was enough. I knew then that this battle was far from over. And I also knew, deep in my bones, that I was ready for it. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, casting golden beams across the benches where strangers whispered about their own cases. I clutched Vernon's pocket watch in my palm, the one he had carried every day until the day he died. Somehow, I believed it carried his strength. Beside me, Martha sat straight-backed, her eyes scanning the room like a general before battle. Remember, she whispered, tell the truth, and let me handle the rest. Across the aisle, Randall stood with his slick suit and smug grin. Thelma sat next to him, her lips painted crimson, and beside her was Clara, my Clara, looking colder than I had ever seen her. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. The bailiff's voice boomed. All rise. Court is now in session. Judge Hawkins entered, his robe flowing as he settled at the bench. A heavy silence fell. Case of Patterson versus Randall, Premier Properties, LLC, the clerk announced. I gripped Martha's hand under the table. This was it. Randall's lawyer went first, his words smooth and poisonous. Your Honor, Mrs. Patterson willingly signed the quitclaim deed. She was of sound mind. She was not coerced, and the documents clearly state that ownership transferred to my client. This case is nothing more than an attempt to undo a legal agreement because the plaintiff has changed her mind. The judge nodded slowly, his face unreadable. Martha rose to respond, her voice sharp with conviction. Your Honor, this is not about changing one's mind. This is about deception. My client believed she was signing a trust to protect her home for her granddaughter. Instead, the deed was slipped among misleading documents, transferring her life's legacy to a man she barely knew. That is fraud. She lifted the papers high for all to see. Notice how the beneficiary line was pre-filled with Mr. Randall's company name. Notice the confusing language that even a lawyer would need hours to parse. This wasn't transparency. This was a trap. Randall smirked, but I saw his jaw tighten ever so slightly. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Patterson, would you please take the stand?" My knees shook as I rose, but I made my way to the witness chair. The bailiff swore me in, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. "Mabel," Martha said gently, "can you tell the court what you thought you were signing that day?" I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. I thought I was signing the house over to Clara. My Clara. So she could have it one day, but I could still live there until I died. That's what I believed. And why did you believe that? I looked straight at Clara, though she refused to meet my eyes. Because my granddaughter and her aunt told me so.
Because they said it was to protect me.
And because Mr. Randall looked me in the eye and told me I'd never lose my home. A tear slipped down my cheek. But he lied. They all lied. And I was a fool to believe them. The courtroom was silent. I could hear only the pounding of my own heart. Martha pressed on. "Mrs. Patterson, what does this home mean to you?" I clutched Vernon's watch tighter. "It's not just wood and nails. It's my husband's laugh in the hallway. It's the marks on the doorframe from when Clara grew. It's Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and 60 years of my life. It's the only piece of Vernon I have left. Without it, I don't know who I am." When I finished, even the judge looked moved. But Randall's lawyer rose with a smirk. "Mrs. Patterson, isn't it true that you signed your name of your own free will?" "Yes," I admitted softly. "And isn't it true that no one held a gun to your head or forced you physically?" "Yes," I whispered. He spread his hands. "Then the matter is simple."
She signed.
"The law is clear." But just as he prepared to sit down, Martha spoke again. "Your Honor, permission to call a surprise witness." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Martha's gaze locked on Clara. "I call Clara Patterson to the stand." Clara's head jerked up. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. Randall leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but the bailiff was already beckoning. Reluctantly, Clara rose and made her way forward, her heels clicking loudly against the courtroom floor. She sat, pale and stiff, as the oath was given. Martha circled her like a hawk. "Clara, did you know Mr. Randall before the day he met your grandmother?" Clara hesitated. "Yes." "How long have you known him?" 8 months. "And in those 8 months, what was your relationship?" Clara's eyes darted to Thelma, then to Randall, then down at her lap. "We were close." "Closer than friends?" Martha pressed. "Yes," Clara muttered. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Martha leaned closer. "So you knew the man who convinced your grandmother to sign away her house. You knew him intimately, and yet you failed to disclose this to your grandmother?" Clara's silence was damning. Martha's voice rose. "And is it true, Clara, that you promised your grandmother she would never lose her home? That you encouraged her to trust Mr. Randall's plan?" Clara's face crumpled.
I did.
"But—" "No further questions," Martha cut in, her voice ringing with victory. The judge's gavel struck once. "Enough." He looked at Clara, then at Randall, then finally at me. "This court has heard enough to determine that fraud and collusion occurred. The deed transfer is hereby nullified. Full ownership of 1247 Maple Street is restored to Mrs. Mabel Patterson." The sound of the gavel came down like thunder. I gasped, tears streaming freely now. Martha squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. Across the aisle, Randall's smug mask shattered, fury etched into his face. Thelma buried her face in her hands. And Clara, my Clara, she simply wept, shoulders shaking, too ashamed to look at me. When it was over, I stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun. The courthouse doors closed behind me, but the weight I carried for weeks was gone. I looked up at the sky, whispering, "We did it, Vernon. We saved our home." Martha walked beside me, her arms strong and steady. "You are braver than you know, Mabel." I smiled through my tears. "No, Martha. I was just an old woman fighting for her life." But thank you for reminding me that I still had fight left in me. As we reached the courthouse steps, Clara called after me. Grandma. I turned slowly. She stood there, red-eyed, makeup streaked, looking more like the little girl I once knew than the hardened woman who betrayed me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was scared about money, about the future, but I see now what I've done. Can you ever forgive me? My heart ached. I wanted to rush into her arms, to tell her yes, to mend the broken pieces. But scars take time to heal. I'll always love you, Clara, I said softly. But forgiveness is not a gift. It's a journey. You'll have to walk that road yourself. And that was how Grandma Mabel fought back against betrayal and won her home, and her dignity, back. But what about Clara? Will she truly change? Or is this only the beginning of another storm? If you want to see how forgiveness, family, and redemption unfold in part 2 of the story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and continue watching from where you left off, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from. Because sometimes the battles we fight at home are the ones that define who we are. Thanks for watching. God bless you.